Hello, this is Paul Glumaz, and today is the 17th of July, and this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And a few days ago, something very spectacular occurred, which is quite amazing, but it's not, uh, it's perfectly understandable. Uh, Prince Charles, who currently is the surrogate head of the empire for his aging mother and father, at a Commonwealth Foreign Ministers meeting, announced that the climate change situation has gotten much worse, and we only have 18 months to shift everything. So he announced that there would be an 18-month all-out mobilization for the green agenda, and that is not the real story. What he's actually saying is that we have 18 months to save the friggin' British Empire. You have to understand what that means. The Green New Deal is a cover for stopping the economic development that's going on in Asia around the Belt and Road. It's stopping the potential, most of all, of there being any economic development process going on in the context of the anticipated global blowout of the financial system. Because if you have a lot of these projects in works and you have a lot of stuff going on, you have a way to reorganize the financial system. In other words, the Belt and Road is partly a physical way of reorganizing the financial system. So, so this is how this is their answer to the possibility of a new architecture emerging as a result of, is to go on this massive berserker anti-development perspective where they're going to try to shut down oil, coal, nuclear, you name it, all under the guise of a environmental catastrophe which is coming within 18 months, right? Well, it doesn't matter whether you believe that or not, because it doesn't matter what you believe. When the Prince Charles, the head of the British Empire, says jump, then everybody jumps. The whole Commonwealth apparatus is being mobilized. All the assets, all the generational assholes that have been part of this financial system are being activated right now. They're being activated to disrupt the North Korean operation of Donald Trump. They're being activated to disrupt China-U.S. discussions. They're being activated to get a war going with Iran. And most of all, they're being activated to activate with this climate change insanity the millennials in the West, in Europe, and also in the United States, because these millennials have been raised in a culture which is not based on rationality. Let's face it, these millennials entering in their 20s, late teens, early 20s, they're not really raised by their parents in a world of rational decisions and rational thinking, and thinking in terms of consequences, and knowing that when you go to the supermarket, what you're buying and using has a chain of a bill of materials and a chain of production that extends all over the world, and you don't want to just, from the farm, to the factory, to the transportation system. These people don't even think in those terms. When OAC talks about the Green New Deal, shutting all this down. She doesn't have any idea what the consequences of that are. And then she says we're going to have free everything, free this and free that. She has no connection between what the reality is and what she's saying. And that goes for that entire generation, pretty much. That's not to say that they're going to successfully activate these people, these millennials. But that's what's going on. They're going to try to do that. And they're already doing that in Hong Kong. All these demonstrators in Hong Kong, they're not people that, these are primarily millennials. These are not people that have families or work and jobs. They're students. And they're trying to import this into China. In other words, saying you need freedom. What do you mean by freedom? Freedom from what? Well, freedom from having to work, freedom to have sex, freedom to take drugs, freedom to do all of that, right? That's freedom, right? It's not the freedom to have a career so you can raise a family. That's not what's meant by freedom. That's not freedom in their view. This is at best a Dionysian sort of mass insanity that's being promoted right now. And guess who's jumping on board this mass insanity? Somebody who isn't very young. In fact, he's going into his late 70s. Bernie Sanders. He's jumping in to this mass insanity. He's all in for the Green New Deal and this massive mobilization that they're now involved in. And the Sunrise Movement plans to have 1,000 people at the next Democratic debate. And the billionaires from the IT sector and from the empire, from the financial sector, from the hedge funds, they're lining up to contribute to this mobilization. Billionaires, right? The Democratic Party is having to deal with billionaires, shoving them in a direction that goes completely against the working class, goes completely against the future of the society. You know, as if somehow that's going to get a Democrat elected president. No, it's not. That's not the issue. The issue is that British Empire is disintegrating, and they don't have a lot of time. They have to move, and what they're worried about is not just Trump getting elected. Yes, that's not good for them, but they're worried about whether Trump will be in a position to do something with other nations in the context of the systemic breakdown of the world financial system. That's what they really are scared of. And the news this week is that a major international financial institution, some people say it's the biggest one that's involved in hedge funds, involved in derivatives, it's called Deutsche Bank, is in deep trouble. And they say a lot of the derivatives players are now pulling out of the derivatives that are associated with Deutsche Bank. So there's this real shaking going on in the global banking community. And then you have these people that want to replace the current Federal Reserve Chairman. I forgot the woman's name, but she's a gold bug. She wants to let it all crash, and we go back to a hard gold system backed up by, guess what? Bitcoin. This new kind of currency. So these people, and that's gonna restrict your physical and credit. You won't be able to do anything under that. So Putin has said last month on June 29th or so, he said that actually earlier than that, in the beginning of June, at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, he says, look, the system is broke. You need a new system. So if Putin is saying this, and all of this is coming up, then there's discussions going on that between Trump and Putin and Xi and probably a lot of other countries and Abe of Japan. It says, look, guys, this thing is going to go, and we got to put something together. And what Charles is saying, Prince Charles is saying in this 18 months, what he's implying is that we have 18 months to ram through the chaos that's required to prevent this from happening. That's really what's really being said, because he's not going to stop China or Russia or India. They're not going to be, and neither is any of the Southeast Asian countries are going to be part of this global warming thing. Asia is growing very fast. Asia is going nuclear. China's going nuclear. Russia's going nuclear. South Korea is doing a lot of, is a leading manufacturer of nuclear power plants. So, and India wants to go nuclear. You know, you can't stop progress, you know, from these countries. These countries have all, the Belt and Road is in full swing. It's got a long ways to go. But you can't stop progress once people get a taste of it and they become optimistic. And you have this one country. This country is the best example of this. It's Bolivia. Now, Bolivia traditionally has been the second most impoverished country in North America. I mean, in the Americas. The most impoverished country was Haiti. You all heard about that. But Bolivia was second most impoverished country. Well, not anymore. Evo Morales, the first indigenous leader of Bolivia, has decided to modernize and turn Bolivia into a nuclear nation based on nuclear power and a scientific nation, and they're committed to a space program. Bolivia! But what's happened is that the people of Bolivia have been inspired by this attitude of science and technology, and what's happened over the period of the last 14 years, is that Bolivia's extreme poverty rate has dropped from 38%, which is huge, down to 15%, and pretty soon it's going to be 5%. So this is Bolivia, baby. This is not, you know, this is like one of the most backward countries in the world. Is coming up quick. And why are they coming up quick? Because people are getting educated in science, they're getting educated in engineering, and so forth and so on. And they did nationalize the oil, I believe, oil production in Bolivia, and the revenues do go in these areas. So this is Bolivia of all countries, okay? So, and they're working with China and Russia to get their nuclear program going. Now, that is optimism, and that's what has to be stopped. Now, Trump has promoted, we're in the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. Well, now we have a mobilization to return to the moon in 5 years. And that's serious. And that is now beginning to surface in the context of the discussion of the 50 years. And this is very serious. And this is the beginning of the United States indicating that it is no longer going to continue to be an anti-development nation. It's no longer going to be a consumer of last resort. It's no longer going to be living off the technology and the science that came from the past. Now, the IT sector is not productive in and of itself. The IT sector is information and control of information. It doesn't necessarily generate physical wealth. But the Chinese are starting to challenge the supremacy of the US IT sector with Huawei and the 5G. So Huawei and the 5G has become the new Cold War. But many countries are not buying into that because they want the 5G because that will make things more efficient. But the problem with the IT sector is, and the billionaires in that sector, is they don't think in terms of production. They think in terms of information. You know, we have the most advanced information systems, but our roads are not being rebuilt. We don't have ancient railway systems. You go look at the railway that comes up and down by Seattle, and you look at it and you say, man, when was that built? 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago? I mean, some of those iron railroad bridges, when you go by Magnolia or by the locks, and you look at them and you say, whoa, when was that built? That's like antique. Where, you know, and then if you go by Golden Gardens there, and you have the rail coming through, you look at that rail, and you go, wow, this is the artery of our nation right here. Look at it, you know. And you begin to wonder what the hell is going on. So we have all this great ability. I have an app. I have several apps on my phone that can help me navigate the quickest time through the traffic, but it's the same. There's the same infrastructure. The more cars are coming in here in the Northwest, in the Seattle area, I-5, you know. So we have all this massive information, but we're not changing the underlying physical reality on which that, you know. So all we're learning how to more efficiently exist in a collapsing system, and that's information, folks. That's not the real economy. And so we're entering this incredible period where the British Empire is disintegrating. If a new architecture is put together by the nations of the world in the context of a financial collapse, that's the end of the empire, folks. That's it. It's gone. So when the British House of Lords say we will not survive a second term, they mean that. The British Empire will not survive a second term of Donald Trump. So they're serious, and they're moving with everything they have. They're unleashing provocations against Iran, and they're getting tremendous help from the State Department, the Defense Department, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, and Bill Barr is having a very hard time getting at this stuff because he's getting tremendous resistance on the investigation that's going on. Not that the investigation is not proceeding, but it's tremendously resistant. And Donald Trump, yesterday, was golfing with Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul. And Rand Paul came up to him and says, I would like to go to Iran and be a special emissary for you, to begin the process of negotiating with Iran. And Trump said, yeah, go ahead. In other words, Trump is giving up completely on the State Department, Pompeo, the National Security Agency, all of that. He's saying, this whole thing sucks. Okay, Rand, Paul, you go ahead and you go open up a dialogue for me with Iran. It means he has to go outside the government to do anything. That sucks. And then he has to, anything that he tries to do, which is decent, is going to be opposed by the Democrats in the House and by a lot of Republicans too. And if you didn't think this is for real, it's both left and right. The so-called left, Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, the progressives, all of this, they're mobilizing to impeach Trump. Or they're mobilizing on the Green New Deal. But then the Koch brothers from the right, they're mobilizing to get a war with China and Russia going. So billionaires like Soros has been funding the left, and billionaires like the Koch brothers have been funding the right. And guess what? The Koch brothers and George Soros have teamed up, and they formed their own another group together. So they're working together now, the Koch brothers and what? What's unifying them? Because they're all part of the British Empire. You have the right and the left. They're all part of the British Empire, and they want to destroy Trump. They want to stop the possibility of a new architecture coming in. So that's where we're at now. That new architecture is going to be it must and has to be a LaRouche-based architecture. And LaRouche has put this out a long time ago. And the way the new architecture has to work is you have to have, above all, a fixed relationship between the currencies of the major nations and also the smaller nations. Now, the value of the currency will fluctuate depending upon how the nation develops or doesn't develop with respect to all the other nations. So how do you make that currency, how do you readjust the fixed relationship? Well, that's where the gold comes in. It's not a gold system, it's a gold reserve system. A gold reserve system is not a gold system. All the gold reserve system does is provide a point of reference for changing the mutual valuation of the currencies. Okay, that's all. And only nations can ask for. Only nations have the right to deal with that. No private interest can turn their currency into gold. The other thing you have to understand is that most of the money out there is created by banks. It's not created by the government. So the banks will lend money to whoever they can, and when Glass-Steagall is in place, they will lend to whatever, under the law, whatever commercial activity is of value. So they will, they will lend, and then when they get paid back, that the money supply drops, and when they loan, the money supply increases. The problem is not the money; it's where the money goes. So when they got rid of Glass-Steagall, then the deposit base, the banks create the money off the deposit base to go into the hedge funds, into the speculation. They don't necessarily find commercial loans to be necessarily lucrative. They find the speculation to be more lucrative in the short term. So all these banks have been hooked into this financial scheme, this financial system. So they have created massive amounts of money, and then the Federal Reserve has backed that up with quantitative easing, and then the corporations in the early part of the first decade, you had the mortgage-backed securities were the big thing, and so they did that, and they bundled them and sold them and all of that. But now it's corporate debt. So what's happening? Corporations are selling bonds, and they're taking the money and buying stock. Then the bonds are being bundled up the way the mortgages are being bundled up, and they're being sold as derivatives. So that's a new big bubble that's going on. It's called corporate leverage debt, and it doesn't create wealth. It's going to collapse. It's meant to collapse. And it will collapse. And the question is, who picks up the pieces and what system is put in place? And that's the whole point. And that's what this 18 months is all about. This massive mobilization by the entire empire to screw everything up, to screw up societies, to screw up production, to screw up, everything, to screw everything up. That's what's going on. And they're doing it more openly, so that they're being seen as doing this more openly. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. This massive mobilization. It's really amazing. Like this whole thing that happened. First, it's the Russia thing. Putin and Trump is an agent of Putin. And they did this whole thing, and they got everybody believing it. And then that didn't pan out. So then it was obstruction of justice. Trump is a common criminal, obstruction of justice. Right? He obstructed justice. And that's not panning out. So now he's a racist. He made some comments about, some rhetorical comments about some of these women. And, I'm not saying it's the greatest comment in the world, but the point is they jumped on it, and now he's a racist. And Pelosi, they passed a resolution condemning, in the House of Representatives, condemning Trump as a racist. What does that mean? You are a racist, and we are passing a resolution condemning you because you're a racist. Meanwhile, Trump's in the black community, the African American community, setting up special zones for industry to come in without having to pay taxes, to bring jobs to the very people that he's supposed to be against. He's supposed to be racist. So he's getting them jobs. He's trying to get them jobs, get these communities that have been destroyed. You know, who destroyed these communities? Well, the banks. The banks redline all these communities. You know, that's the historical way they do it. They create crime, and then the crime drives people out, and you know they redline them, and there's no. So Trump is trying to reverse the very process, and he's being called a racist. Right? So this is how crazy the situation has become. So I think I run out of time here. So okay.